The Galactic Council's greatest fear, the Great Chamber of the Andorian Council, stretched beyond the limits of most species' vision, its crystalline walls pulsing with the soft blue light of 1,000 stars. Ambassador Thexara stood at the center podium, her translucent body reflecting the chamber's glow like a living prism. The elegant Velthani had served the Galactic Council for 3 centuries, but never had she called an emergency session with such desperate urgency. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 different species occupied their designated areas. The reptilian Drakmari delegation sat in their heated section, scales gleaming under warm lamps. The gaseous Nethri floated in their containment spheres, swirling with anxious colors. The insectoids clicked their mandibles in worried rhythm from their elevated platforms. Each species had contributed to the greatest peaceful civilization the galaxy had ever known, and now they faced its potential end. Honored representatives. Thexara began, her voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that allowed universal translation. We gather today because the unthinkable has occurred. The Devourers have returned. A collective shudder ran through the chamber. The Devourers were legend, nightmare stories told to young aliens to make them appreciate the peace their ancestors had built. 500 years ago, these creatures had swept through the outer rim, consuming entire star systems, turning thriving worlds into lifeless husks. They had vanished as suddenly as they appeared, leaving behind only empty space and terrified survivors. General Korth of the Drakmari military rose from his heated platform, his massive form covered in the ceremonial armor of his rank. His yellow eyes glowed with barely controlled fear as he activated the chamber's holographic display. Images of devastation filled the air above them, dead worlds stripped of all life, space stations torn apart at the molecular level, entire fleets reduced to cosmic dust. The first attacks began 6 months ago in the outer spiral, Korth's deep voice rumbled through the translation matrix. We initially dismissed the reports as equipment failures or natural disasters. No one wanted to believe they had returned. He gestured at the floating images with a clawed hand. 17 star systems have gone completely silent. Our long-range sensors detect nothing, no life signs, no electromagnetic signatures, no matter beyond basic stellar debris. Admiral Zephylos of the Nethra pulsed with dark purple anxiety within his containment sphere. Our most advanced reconnaissance probes were destroyed before they could transmit meaningful data. Whatever is consuming these systems operates beyond our understanding of physics. The chamber erupted in worried chatter as representatives spoke in dozens of languages simultaneously. Thexara raised her crystalline hand for silence, the gesture creating a brief rainbow cascade through her transparent form. The situation is more dire than initial reports suggested, she continued. Our combined military forces have engaged the Devourers on 3 separate occasions. Each encounter has resulted in total fleet destruction with 0 enemy casualties confirmed. The statement hit the assembly like a physical blow. The Galactic Council commanded the most advanced military technology in known space. Their ships could manipulate gravity, bend spacetime, and harness the power of stars themselves. The idea that such forces could be completely ineffective seemed impossible. A new voice spoke from the ZACTH delegation. Prime Hive Singer Kickstar stepped forward on her 6 legs, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's light in fractal patterns. Perhaps we should consider evacuation protocols. If we cannot fight them, we must preserve what we can. Evacuation to where? General Korth demanded. They move faster than our fastest ships. They appear to exist partially outside normal spacetime. There is nowhere to run that they cannot follow. The debate that followed revealed the depth of their desperation. The Velthani proposed using their reality-shifting technology to hide entire civilizations in pocket dimensions. The Drakmari suggested mobilizing every military vessel in the galaxy for one massive assault. The Nethri offered to sacrifice themselves by creating a barrier of pure energy around the core worlds. Each proposal was more desperate than the last, and each was ultimately dismissed as impossible or insufficient. Hours passed as the greatest minds in galactic civilization struggled with a problem that had no solution. They had grown comfortable in their advanced peaceful society, where conflicts were resolved through negotiation and where warfare existed only in historical records. The Devourers represented a type of threat their culture was completely unprepared to face. Finally, Thexara called for a recess. As representatives filed out to consult with their home governments, she remained in the chamber, staring at the holographic displays of dead worlds. The weight of 47 civilizations rested on decisions that would be made in this room, and she had no idea how to save them. It was during this moment of quiet desperation that her personal communication device chimed with an incoming transmission. The signal came from the outer monitoring stations, where long-range sensors tracked everything approaching Council space. What she heard changed everything. Council Control, this is Monitor Station Alpha 7. We have an unidentified vessel requesting permission to enter restricted space. Ship configuration unknown, appears to be of alien design not matching any species in our database. Thexara frowned, her crystalline features shifting with confusion. Impossible. Every spacefaring species in the galaxy is represented in this council. What are their intentions? They claim to represent a species called humans and request an audience with the council leadership. They say they have information about the current crisis. The word humans meant nothing to Thexara. In 5 centuries of diplomatic service, she had never encountered this species. No records existed in the vast council databases. Yet something about the timing seemed significant. In their darkest hour, when all hope seemed lost, strangers appeared offering help. What is their technological assessment? She asked. Primitive by our standards, Ambassador. Their ship appears to use chemical propulsion with basic fusion drive. No evidence of gravity manipulation, spacetime distortion, or energy-matter conversion systems. However, there are some unusual readings we cannot identify. Thexara made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Grant them temporary passage. Escort them to Docking Bay 7 under full security protocols. I will meet with them personally. As news of the mysterious visitors spread through the council chambers, representatives returned from their recess with renewed curiosity. The Drakmari were suspicious of any unknown military threat. The Nethri found the timing suspiciously convenient. The Zakth buzzed with collective anxiety about strangers arriving during their crisis. When the human ship docked, Thexara was surprised by its crude construction. The vessel looked like it had been assembled from scrap metal and held together by determination rather than engineering precision. Burn marks scarred its hull, and weapon ports showed signs of recent use. This was not a ship built for exploration or diplomacy, it was a tool of war. The airlock cycled open with a mechanical hiss that sounded harsh compared to the smooth energy transitions used by Council technology. 3 figures emerged, and Thexara felt her first shock of recognition. These beings looked remarkably similar to several species in the Council, bipedal with 2 arms and bilateral symmetry, but there was something different about their bearing. The leader stepped forward. A female with dark skin and graying hair pulled back in a practical style. Her clothing was simple and functional, lacking the elaborate decorations that marked rank in civilized society. Behind her came 2 others, the tall male with calculating eyes and a younger female carrying what appeared to be primitive scanning equipment. I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth Confederation Defense Force, the leader said in clear, unaccented words that somehow translated perfectly despite using no technology visible to Thexara's enhanced sensors. We understand you're having trouble with the Devourers. Asterisk. The casual way she spoke the name sent chills through the assembled council members who had gathered to witness this first contact. These strangers not only knew about their greatest enemy but spoke of them with familiar confidence. I am Ambassador Thexara of the Velthani, she replied, struggling to maintain diplomatic protocol while her mind raced with questions. We welcome you to Council space, though we are curious how you learned of our current crisis. Captain Vasquez exchanged glances with her companions before answering. We've been fighting them for the past 200 years. Your Council space borders what we call the Dead Zone sectors where the Devourers have been most active. We've been waiting for them to make their move toward the galactic core. The statement created chaos in the chamber. Representatives who had thought themselves facing an impossible enemy now learned that these primitive aliens had been successfully resisting the Devourers for 2 centuries. General Korth pushed forward, his massive form towering over the small human delegation. Impossible, he growled. Our most advanced fleets were destroyed without inflicting any damage. How could your primitive technology succeed where we failed? Captain Vasquez smiled, and something in that expression made the battle-hardened Drakmara general step back involuntarily. General, you're thinking about this wrong. You're trying to fight the Devourers like they are just another military force. They are not. They are a force of nature, like a hurricane or a plague. You don't defeat a hurricane with superior firepower. Then how do you defeat it? Admiral Zephilos asked, his gaseous form swelling with desperate hope. The human captain looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Her next words would shatter everything they thought they knew about warfare, survival, and the price of victory. You don't defeat it, she said quietly. You survive it. You make it cost more than it's worth. You make it bleed for every inch. You show it that some prey fights back hard enough that it's easier to find food elsewhere. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. For 5 centuries, galactic civilization had known only peace, negotiation, and controlled conflict. The idea of making an enemy bleed for victory was alien to their entire worldview. But as they stared at this small group of scarred survivors who had spent 2 centuries learning how to hurt the unhurtable, they began to understand that everything was about to change. The price of victory. The war room aboard the human vessel Endurance looked nothing like the elegant command centers of galactic civilization. Exposed cables snaked along the walls, repair patches covered blast damage, and the air carried the metallic scent of recycled atmosphere pushed beyond its limits. Ambassador Thexara found the crude surroundings somehow fitting as she watched Commander Marcus Chen outline humanity's impossible plan. The Devourers consume energy, Chen explained, pointing to a holographic display that flickered with power fluctuations. They feed on the life force of entire worlds, the energy signatures of advanced technology, even the organized thoughts of intelligent beings. Everything your civilization has built makes you a more attractive target. General Korth studied the tactical displays with growing unease. The human presentation showed battle footage that defied everything he understood about military doctrine. Human ships deliberately rammed into devourer entities, sacrificing themselves to create openings for others. Infantry units fought impossible odds not to win, but to buy time for civilians to escape. Entire colonies had been abandoned not in defeat, but as bait for elaborate ambushes. This is madness, the Drakmara general rumbled. You're describing suicide tactics. No military force can sustain such losses. Commander Chen turned to face the assembled alien officers, his scarred face showing the toll of 2 centuries of war. General, you're still thinking like a civilization that has something to lose. We learned long ago that sometimes the only way to save what matters is to sacrifice everything else. Captain Vasquez stepped forward, activating another display. Show them the Melbourne Gambit, Marcus. The hologram shifted to show a human colony world surrounded by devourer bioships. Instead of fighting a defensive battle, the human defenders had done something unthinkable. They had detonated their planet's fusion reactors, turning their own world into a temporary star. The explosion had destroyed the devourer fleet, but also rendered the planet uninhabitable for 1,000 years. 15 million colonists died, Vasquez said quietly. But their sacrifice saved 3 neighboring systems with a combined population of 2 billion. The Devourers learned that attacking human worlds carried a price they hadn't expected. Admiral Zephilos pulsed with horrified fascination. You murdered your own people. No, Chen corrected. They volunteered. Every single one. When the evacuation ships couldn't carry everyone, the colonists drew lots to see who would stay behind to trigger the reactor overload. Some families chose to stay together rather than be separated. The concept was so alien to galactic civilization that several representatives simply couldn't process it. Their entire culture was built on preserving individual life, on finding solutions that saved everyone. The idea of voluntary sacrifice for strategic advantage was beyond their comprehension. Thexara studied the tactical analyses with a crystalline mind, working through the implications. Commander Chen, our military doctrine is based on minimizing casualties while achieving objectives. How do you reconcile these tactics with preserving civilization? Ambassador, you're asking the wrong question, Chen replied. We don't preserve civilization by avoiding casualties. We preserve it by making sure that when people die, their deaths serve a purpose. Every sacrifice buys time, space, or advantage for others to survive. The joint planning sessions that followed revealed the vast gulf between human and galactic military thinking. The aliens proposed elegant solutions using their advanced technology, gravity wells to trap devourer ships, temporal distortions to slow their approach, energy barriers to protect core worlds. Each proposal was met with human skepticism about its sustainability. Your technology is impressive, Captain Vasquez acknowledged during one heated debate. But the devourers adapt. They learn. They consume your energy barriers and turn them into weapons. They feed on your temporal distortions and become faster. Every advantage you think you have becomes food for them. Then what do you propose? Demanded Prime Hive Singer Kickstar, her compound eyes reflecting frustration. Vasquez smiled grimly. We give them what they want, but not how they want it. The plan she outlined was horrifying in its simplicity. Humanity would provide the bait. Colonies and fleets deliberately positioned to attract devourer attention. But these apparent targets would be elaborate traps, designed not to defeat the enemy but to make them pay an unbearable price for every victory. The Galactic representatives watched in stunned silence as Chen detailed the preparation. Human volunteers would man decoy installations filled with fake technology signatures. Automated systems would broadcast false distress signals to draw devourer attention to prepared killing grounds. Most shocking of all, human civilians would remain in potential target zones not as helpless victims, but as active participants in the defense. You're asking us to use our own people as bait, General Korth said, his voice heavy with disgust. We are asking you to let us use ourselves as bait, Vasquez corrected. Every human ship, every human world, every human life has been committed to this war since the day the Devourers first appeared in our space. We don't see civilians and military. We see humanity fighting for survival. The final preparation took 3 months. Human engineers worked alongside alien technicians, creating hybrid technologies that combined the best of both approaches. Galactic energy weapons were modified with human targeting systems that prioritized psychological impact over raw damage. Alien defensive systems were integrated with human tactical doctrine that assumed the loss of any given position. The most difficult part was training the galactic military forces in human combat philosophy. Soldiers who had learned to minimize risk and preserve equipment had to adapt to tactics that treated both as expendable resources. Officers who had spent careers avoiding civilian casualties had to accept that sometimes civilians would choose to become combatants. When the Devourers finally came, they came in numbers that dwarfed all previous attacks. The sky above the Kepler system filled with bioships that blocked out the stars themselves. Tentacles the size of capital ships reached across space, while smaller parasitic entities swarmed like deadly insects around the massive motherships. The battle began exactly as the humans had predicted. The Devourers ignored the carefully positioned galactic fleet and went straight for what appeared to be the most vulnerable targets: human colony ships filled with refugees and defended by primitive chemical weapons. But these weren't helpless civilians. They were humanity's veterans, families who had spent generations learning how to hurt the unhurtable. As the Devourer bioships closed in, expecting easy feeding, they found themselves caught in a web of coordinated destruction. The colony ships exploded not in defeat, but in carefully timed nuclear detonations that channeled the energy into focused beams. The refugees weren't running away, they were manning weapons systems that fired streams of superheated metal at relativistic speeds. Children who should have been in shelters were operating communication arrays that coordinated attacks across multiple star systems. All units, this is Endurance Control, Chen's voice crackled across the fleet channels. Execute Phoenix Protocol. Show them what it costs to hunt humans. What followed violated every principle of civilized warfare. Human ships deliberately crashed into Devourer entities, their crews using the final moments before impact to upload critical data to surviving vessels. Ground forces abandoned defensible positions not in retreat, but to lead enemy forces into prepared ambushes. Even when positions were overrun, the apparent defeated would detonate pre-placed charges that turned victory into Pyrrhic sacrifice. The galactic forces watched in amazement and horror as humanity demonstrated what 2 centuries of guerrilla Warfare had taught them. They didn't fight to win battles, they fought to make the enemy pay such a terrible price that continued aggression became unsustainable, but the true turning point came when the Devourer hive mind itself materialized. In the battle space, the entity was vast beyond comprehension, a creature of pure malevolent intelligence that fed on the ordered thoughts of entire civilizations. It reached out with psychic tendrils that could drain the life force from whole star systems, expecting to feast on the advanced minds of galactic civilization. Instead, it encountered something it had never faced in 500 years of feeding. The human consciousness wasn't organized like other species. Where aliens thought in structured patterns that could be easily consumed, humans thought in chaotic, contradictory ways that resisted absorption. Their minds were full of paradoxes, dark humor, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat even in the face of certain destruction. Captain Vasquez opened a direct communication channel to the hive mind. Her voice carrying across space through means that galactic science couldn't explain. You want to feed on us? Fine. But understand what you're trying to digest. We are the species that looked at the infinite void and decided to build campfires. We are the creatures that found beauty in destruction and hope in despair. We've been preparing for you for 200 years, and we are not afraid to die. The psychic battle that followed could be felt across the entire star system. The hive mind, accustomed to overwhelming ordered alien thoughts, found itself struggling against the chaotic resilience of human consciousness. For every human mind it consumed, it absorbed not just memories and knowledge, but also the bitter experience of loss, the burning desire for revenge, and the absolute refusal to surrender. The cost was terrible. Entire human colonies went silent as their populations were drained by the psychic assault. But each sacrifice fed poison into the hive mind's consciousness, the accumulated grief, rage, and determination of a species that had spent 2 centuries learning how to hurt things that couldn't be hurt. When the battle finally ended, both sides had paid prices that would echo through history. The Devourer fleet was broken, its bioships drifting dead in space around the corpse of their hive mind. But half the human fleet was gone, and 3 entire colonies had been sacrificed to achieve the victory. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors among the debris, Ambassador Thexara found Captain Vasquez in the medical bay of the Endurance. The human commander was alive but changed, her eyes holding the weight of losses that no being should have to carry. Was it worth it? Thexara asked quietly. Vasquez looked out the viewport at the stars that were visible again now that the Devourer ships no longer blocked the light. Ask me in 100 years, Ambassador. When children who will never know the fear of the Devourers are playing in gardens on worlds that still exist because of what we did here. The integration of humanity into galactic civilization changed everything. The other species learned that sometimes survival required accepting terrible choices. They discovered that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Most importantly, they understood that civilization's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its wisdom, but its ability to find people willing to sacrifice everything to preserve what they loved. The humans, for their part, finally found something they had been seeking for 2 centuries, a future worth the price they had paid to secure it. They became the galaxy's protectors not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they were the ones willing to bear the cost of keeping the darkness at bay, and in the quiet moments between crises, when the galaxy enjoyed the peace that sacrifice had brought, both species learned something profound about the nature of victory. Sometimes winning wasn't about defeating your enemy, it was about proving that some things were worth dying for, and that others were worth living for. The stars that had fallen silent began to sing again, and their song was one of hope earned through loss, of light preserved by those willing to face the dark.